A challenge. It will always be a challenge to Hamas.
So how long do you think this exchange of firepower will continue?
It's hard, but I think it might continue for a while. Somebody has to get sensible, and I think it should be Israel, because the way it is, if Israel keeps doing what he's doing, he's going to galvanize more support. If the emergence of even hardliners, Muslim hardliners, we can even trace it back to Middle East. What's happening? What we're having, suicide bombing, this cell group of, what Israel is more or less doing is raising up more hardliners. People that their children, their parents are being killed, their children are dying. They will see themselves as having no other choice but to rise up and take up the challenge. It's a war that Israel cannot win. The only thing is to come to the negotiating table. Even the negotiating table will be a long-drawn battle of wits, as it were, because it's a spiraling, conundrum that somehow it can't end. It can't end, but somebody just have to, at some point in time, say, "Can we sit down? Can we see how at least we can get along?" The animosity is too deep for us to see an end. Even if the gun stops shooting today, the suspicion cannot stop and won't stop for a long time.
Mr. Vincent, thank you so much for speaking with me.
My joy.
When we come back after the break, Malaysia is not the only country demanding to know what happened to the ill-fated flight that crashed in Ukraine. So are the United States, the UK, Australia, and most surprisingly, Russia. Please join us again.
Fun, inspiration, and knowledge. That's what you get from readers, writers, publishers, and the entire book world. Get some interesting reviews, events, interviews, and latest updates from the book world. The channel's book club, inspiring you one page at a time.
Who done it? Who fired the missile that allegedly hit a passenger plane coming from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur? That's the question Western powers have been asking since the crash of the Malaysian flight MH17. Remember, fighting has been going on in that part of Ukraine for weeks now by pro-Russian separatists trying to declare independence from Ukraine. Of course, there's a lot of speculation as to what really happened, but for countries such as the United States, there's no doubt that the plane was shot down and Russia is connected to the crime in some way.
It's been barely 5 months since the Malaysian flight MH370 went missing over the Indian Ocean. Families are yet to come to terms with the loss of their loved ones, and the nation, still grieving for bodies not found, or some clue as to what might have happened. Another flight misfortune was hardly anything Malaysia was prepared for. And once again, relatives of the passengers are angry. Only this time, it's not directed at the Malaysian government, but at Ukraine. They're angry at the way bodies of the crash victims are being handled. There were reports they were being transported to an unknown destination via refrigerated trains. Rebel leader Alexander Borodai said the bodies would remain in Torres until international aviation inspectors arrive. Malaysia's transport minister has arrived at the Ukrainian capital Kiev, saying he feels the crash site has been severely compromised. With him are a team of 133 officials and experts, technical and medical. But word on the ground says that no real investigation has begun in the case. The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte says the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is negotiating with separatists to bring the train of bodies. Today I spoke several times to my colleagues, among them were the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and to British Prime Minister David Cameron, and I will be speaking tonight once again to President Vladimir Putin. The purpose of all those talks are to put pressure on all involved parties At this very moment, Hans Timmermans is flying to New York for a consultation with the United Nations Security Council. The rebels say they will hand over the plane's flight recorders to the International Civil Aviation Organization, but the U.S. Department of State said the rebels had tampered with other potential evidence. And as militants have been keeping international monitors away from wreckage, Russian President Vladimir Putin has urged the rebels to cooperate and that the United Nations mandated investigation must not lead to conclusions. In the meantime, Moscow has denied involvement in the crash, pointing fingers instead at the Ukrainian army. But to the United States, Russia needs to step up and take responsibility for the action of allied separatists.
We picked up the imagery of this launch. We know the trajectory. We know where it came from. We know the timing, and it was exactly at the time that this aircraft disappeared from the radar. We also know from voice identification that the separatists were bragging about shooting it down afterwards. So there's a stacking up of evidence here which Russia needs to help account for. But you cannot reward terrorism. There can't be a set of preconditioned demands that are going to be met. So we support the Egyptian initiative joined in by Israel and others to have an immediate ceasefire.
Britain, on the other hand, says it will seek to persuade other European nations at the EU meeting later this week to impose sanctions on Russia. 298 people were on flight MH17. The passenger list released by Malaysia Airlines shows the plane was carrying 193 Dutch nationals, including one with dual U.S. nationality. Other victims included 43 Malaysians, 27 Australians, 12 Indonesians, 10 Britons, 4 Germans, 4 Belgians, 3 Filipinos, 1 Canadian and 1 New Zealander. Among the number were 80 children. And while the blame game continues, relatives like Sahadat Adi Bey, whose 83-year-old uncle was killed in the crash, need the support of family members to get through his period of mourning.
Relations between Nigeria and France have grown more cordial in recent years. France says Nigeria is its most important trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa, with trade between them amounting to 5.3 billion euros. But to the French Consul General, Mr. François Sassenet, figures do not always tell the real story. While France hopes to continue to deepen relations, it does acknowledge some parts of it may not be sustainable.
It's the Bastille Day celebration by the French government in Nigeria. France's Consul General spends the evening with its country's hosts from different sectors. Relations between Nigeria and France go beyond trade, though France is Nigeria's second largest trade partner, and Nigeria, France's largest trade partner in sub-Saharan Africa. The French have been supportive of Nigeria, with military experts in the country helping Nigerian military deal with the Boko Haram insurgency. French representatives were also present at Nigeria's centenary celebration.
Our relation became more strategic. The presidential visits and then the summit we organized, they called the mini security summit that took place in Paris on the issue that Nigeria is facing, security issues, shows that there is an international concern from that, and there is now the conscience that these challenges that Nigeria is facing are not only Nigerian, they are regional. It's a regional problematic involving all the countries of the region. This is why we proposed this meeting with Nigeria and all its neighboring countries and all the interested partners. It was followed up by another meeting in London, and the dynamic thus engaged is promising to reinstall security in the whole Sahelian region, actually.
Trade relations have been on a steady increase in the last 2 years at 40% yearly, but there are always other opportunities for bilateral relations.
What is a bit puzzling about our treasury is that we are exporting a lot of diesel oil to Nigeria, which doesn't seem right somehow, and not sustainable. Nigeria will have to refine its own diesel, and because it's an oil producer, we don't produce oil, so we import oil, refine it, and sell it again to you. It's not sustainable. We are trying to develop this. We don't have enough Nigerian students in France. We have about 300 or 400 a year now. We have 4,000 or 5,000 in Senegal, which is a much smaller country. Senegal is smaller than Lagos, I think, Lagos State. So we need to have more Nigerians trained in France. There's a language issue, there's several issues, but we are trying to organize it so that it works.
Nigeria's security is important to France, as expressed in the African summit called by French President François Hollande, where the presidents of Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger Republic and the DR Congo held talks for several hours and resolved to set up inter-country monitoring of the borders to curb Boko Haram's insurgency in northern Nigeria, believed to be spilling over its borders to its neighbors. But tonight was not a night for talking shop. July 14, 2014 was a day of celebration for both the French and for Nigeria.
And that's the program this week. Thanks for watching. Write to us. We'd like to hear from you. The addresses are on your screen. I am Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.